Hello San Diego. On today's news, we will be covering the drug fentanyl. This drug was introduced as an intravenous anesthetic in the 1960s, which was synthesized by Dr. Paul Janssen and the Janssen Company of beers in Belgium. Janssen's goal was to produce a fast and effective drug that would help treat many problems. Although morphine and meperidine were already present in society, they were slow and poor drugs. Chemists in the lab knew that they needed a more lipid-soluble drug as well as bind to a receptor. This drug has been known to be a more prevalent drug due to its risk. Congress reported that just 2 milligrams is considered to be a lethal dose. A wave of overdose deaths due to fentanyl arose in 2013, and just a couple years ago in 2021, there were 100,000 reported deaths correlated to opioid overdose, with 67% being because of fentanyl. New numbers from the DEA showed that in 2026, 2.3 million pills containing fentanyl have been seized so far. That is equal to around 832 pounds of fentanyl and 20.1 million deadly doses. For those that don't know, fentanyl is a synthetic opioid. The medical uses for fentanyl are chronic pain management, cancer pain, anesthesia and surgery, and post-operative pain. It is actually about 100 times more potent than morphine, meaning that a lower dose is required to be effective. If you're doing the math at home, you may notice that that's roughly 10 lethal doses per pill on average. This is because I have mentioned previously that the average American deadly dose of fentanyl is about 2 milligrams. As a visual representation, that amount fits just on the top of the tip of the pen. For more on this deadly drug and the consequences of the fentanyl crisis, we go to Mason.
Thank you, Analyssa. Today I'm here with the fentanyl expert. Can you explain to us why the fentanyl crisis is something that we've never seen before?
Well, Mason, there are certain aspects of the opioid crisis that make it such a widespread issue. First of all, opioids have legitimate medical uses, so their abuse cannot be prevented by simply making these drugs illegal, unlike other narcotics like cocaine. Secondly, specifically concerning fentanyl, its extreme potency makes it exceptionally dangerous. As Analyssa said, the deadly dose can fit on the tip of a pencil.
Wow, that's really interesting. So can you explain to me why fentanyl is so potent?
That's a great question. It has to do with the structure of fentanyl compared to other opioids like heroin. Fentanyl is much more lipophilic or soluble in lipids than other opioids. It also has a lower molecular weight. This means that it efficiently penetrates biological membranes and reaches systems like the central nervous system, allowing it to quickly bind to opioid receptors in the brain.
That's very good to know. So do fentanyl overdoses happen more often than other opioid overdoses? And if so, how do these overdoses happen?
In 2023, overdoses of synthetic opioids, primarily fentanyl, accounted for 69% of all overdoses, and an astounding 92% of opioid overdoses. Overdoses happen when an opioid receptors in the brain become overwhelmed and excessively stimulated. Although there are many types of opioid receptors, the mu opioid receptors are especially responsible for these overdoses because they are responsible for regulating respiration rate. When fentanyl or another opioid binds the mu receptor, it inhibits the conversion of ATP into cyclic AMP. This then causes a cascade of events within the neuron. First, the potassium channels open, causing potassium to flow out of the neuron. This creates a negative charge that builds up within the neuron, thus requiring more sodium to stimulate and fire a proper action potential. Secondly, the inhibition of production of cyclic AMP also causes the closure of calcium channels on the neuron, which prevents vesicles from releasing neurotransmitters. Factors prevent the neuron from propagating impulses properly, and action potentials can't fire. This both is what makes opioids painkillers, but also dangerous. It prevents neurons in the central nervous system from propagating pain signals, but opioids also prevent respiratory receptors from sending signals to the lungs in order to signal breathing. During an overdose, when these receptors are overwhelmed, the inhibition of the respiratory signals is too great, and they can cause breathing to slow too far and cease, causing death.
Wow, fentanyl is very scary. So how does someone become addicted to opioids?
Opioids like fentanyl are addicted for many reasons, but one of the primary drives for addiction is withdrawal. People continue to abuse opioids to avoid severe withdrawal symptoms that come from sustained opioid use. Some of these symptoms include extreme nausea, insomnia, and rapid heart rate.
Wow. So what is opioid tolerance then?
After taking opioids like fentanyl for an extended period of time, opioid receptors in the brain can become less sensitive and responsive to opioids. This means that in order to achieve the same physiological effect, a larger dose will be necessary. This is especially dangerous because taking continuously larger doses of opioids puts people at a greater risk for overdosing.
Wow, this was very informative and important. Thank you so much for taking your time out of the way, the fentanyl expert, and teaching us about this very scary drug.
One terrifying thing about the fentanyl crisis is not every exposure is intentional. Many people who overdose on fentanyl have no idea that they're putting the opioid into their bodies. Many counterfeit pills are laced with fentanyl, causing unintentional consumption. With the rise of these counterfeit pills, it is more important than ever to keep young people educated on the dangers of drug use. For more on this, we go to Mason.
Thank you, Analyssa. Today we're here with high schoolers to raise awareness about fentanyl and how it could make its way into your life without you even knowing it. So here's Sookie to illustrate these dangers. So, Sookie, what's your initial impression of fentanyl?
I know it's a really strong drug, but I don't really think it's anything that high schoolers do or whatever.
Well, actually, you'd be surprised. Fentanyl affects even people your age. About 22 high school-aged adolescents die each week from overdoses in the U.S., largely driven by fentanyl-laced pills.
Wow, I had no idea.
What's even worse is that you could be exposed to fentanyl without even knowing it. So there's this thing called counterfeit pills, which are a huge problem, and in recent years, the number of overdose deaths involving counterfeit pills has grown immensely. Numbers recorded from October to December 2021 show that roughly 5% of these overdose deaths were due to these counterfeit pills. More than half of these during the time, due to counterfeit pills, were affecting people of young age, younger than even 35.
Wow, that's really scary. You could overdose and not even know what you're taking then.
Exactly. That's why it's important to never take pills you don't know that aren't from legitimate prescriptions, even from your friends.
Is there any easy way to tell if these pills are legitimate or not?
Well, I'm glad that you said that. Let's put that to the test. So, one of these pills is legit and the other contains fentanyl. Can you tell the difference?
I don't know. They look identical to me.
Exactly. Unfortunately, many counterfeit pills look identical to legitimate pills, so you'll never know if it's the real thing or not.
That's really scary. What would you even do if someone overdosed on fentanyl?
We actually have a safety PSA prepared to demonstrate the steps that you should take in the event of an overdose. For that, we'll take it back to Analyssa.
Thank you, Mason. To end today's news segment on fentanyl, I'm going to tell you what you should do in case you encounter somebody having an opioid overdose. Opioid overdoses can happen very quickly and silently. Recognizing the signs, unresponsiveness, slow breathing, blue lips can save a life. Narcan blocks opioid receptors and restores breathing, but emergency care is still essential. If you suspect an overdose, call 911, administer Narcan if available, and never leave the person alone. Thank you.